welcome to the King of Games 98. On this episode, we have Grim Fandango versus Starcraft.
Hello everyone, welcome to today's special Battle of 1998 bonus episode of the Region Free Gamers podcast. My name is Paul Romalo, and with me today, out of Rhode Island, Arnaldo Perez.
Woo! Very excited.
I know, we're all pretty hyped.
I'm pretty pumped.
And joining us for the second time, after sadly advancing Pokemon forward in this tournament.
I'm very happy about that.
Sure. Our good friend Benja Hiller.
Hello there.
Thanks again for joining us, Benja.
Yeah, of course. Always a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. And of course, before we get to today's two games that'll be fighting it out, I must thank everyone for listening and interacting with us on social media. Mm-hmm. You know, honestly, the best part of the show, besides being forced to talk about video games with my friends, is the chatting we do with you all online and in person. Like, I mean, Arnie, you've got out of your gaming chair and met a couple of our listeners, right?
Yes, I've slid my gaming chair across my floor mat, gaming mat, and managed to go out and meet a few people who listen to this podcast. And surprisingly enough, they did not try to murder me.
What? That goes contrary to everything I've heard about podcast listeners. My mother was so wrong, honestly. But you're getting a gaming chair tomorrow, right, Arnie?
I am. Well, I think I'm getting it today. Actually, I'm finally joining the ranks of the elite gamers.
Can you tell our listeners what my reaction was when you said you were getting a gaming chair?
Oh my God. Paul had sent me this picture. I assume this is what you're talking about. Is this picture of the...
Well, actually, the thing I was talking about was my immediate and loud laughter.
Oh,
when
yes.
You said you were getting a gaming chair.
Yes, your loud guffaw at my expense.
But beyond that, please, what else did we talk about?
We had talked about this Instagram post that Paul had sent me. That was a promoted Instagram post by Tech Ninjas, which basically highlights this beautiful gaming setup where this man has a very comfortable, I must admit, looking gaming chair, a gaming ottoman for his feet, which I desperately need. I never even considered like elevating my feet for gaming, but I think it would help me.
Circulation, it's important.
Of course, just my performance in general.
Yeah.
And my favorite part is the gaming floor pad, which is FLORPAD, and the R is in extreme green, just so you know how fucking extreme it is.
Worth mentioning that the word floor pad is in the Metal Gear Solid font.
Oh hell
yes! Like I'm all about that. It's
so good. Is?
Yes.
Yeah. If you zoom in on it, you'll see it's got the OG Metal Gear Solid font. It's awesome.
Hell yeah. And of course he has 3 computer monitors, all with a Monster Energy logo behind them.
Oh, so good.
This is all very important.
So good. Now, Arnie, just so you know, I only make fun of you for getting the gaming chair because I'm jealous. You know, like I'm sitting in to be honest with you, kind of shitty office chair right now at my desk. If I had a gaming chair while we were, my God, it's going to sound like I'm making fun of you again. But if I had a gaming chair while we were recording this podcast, the podcast would be like 20% better. Oh, yeah. No doubt about it.
Well, here's the thing is eventually I'm hoping that we do like a video thing for the podcast and that I'll be the cool one with the gaming chair. I'll finally be streamer level gamer, which is what I've always wanted.
Please get the largest gaming chair you possibly can. I want you to look like a small child in the gaming chair while we're doing the podcast. That's my dream. And you have to have the shark. Absolutely, Ben.
Oh, yes. There's a shark headrest.
20%, I think.
I think we should upload this image with the podcast. I think we should make this like the cover image for this episode.
We might have to, because like We're not saying anything bad about it. I mean,
No.
we kind of are, but we kind of aren't. Like, again, I make fun of it because I'm jealous. Honestly,
Well, this was
right?
our, I think, subtle segue of saying that we are now sponsored by Floorpad, and if you'd like to get yourself a Floorpad, you can use our promo code at www.floorpad.com/RFG. It will get you 0% off, and I think they'll be very confused if you complain.
I think they'll actually charge you more.
Charge you
if
more
you
money.
Put in that promo code.
Yeah, like another $5.
Exactly. Yeah, those guys are assholes. We're charging you more because you're listening to them. So, so again, everybody, because that was quite the segue, or quite the Arnie, what's the word I'm looking for?
Digression.
When we go off topic, digression. Thank you.
You mean normal show format? That's
See, this is why I need a gaming chair. If I had a gaming chair,
so much
my
more
vocabulary,
focused.
I'd be able to pull up these words like that. You know, like it wouldn't be an issue. So yeah, I'm gonna have to get on this. You're on the right track there, Arnie. But everybody, so thanks for listening again, everybody. If you enjoy the show, tell a friend. And don't forget to leave us a rating and review on the Apple Podcasts app. 5 stars, please.
Yep.
And if you have left us a review, awesome. We
You're the
love you
best.
guys. We really appreciate it. Yeah, absolutely.
And if you haven't
So-
left us a review, you're not my friend, and I will not change my mind on that until you leave us a review.
So we were talking before the show with Benja, and unfortunately she made the mistake of telling us that she was in a band.
Yes.
And
Yeah,
I
it was a big
immediately was
mistake.
like, well, we're going to talk about this on the show, right? So sad. This is what happens when you
Yeah.
share personal information with us.
Yeah, I never do that again.
Benja, tell me about the band. I'm really interested.
Yeah, so I played in a band, and the band was called Power Yoga. I think I wrote about it on Instagram a while ago.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and we did some kind of screamo with a bit of drum and bass and 8-bit and 16-bit samples and
Oh my
some
God.
film samples, and it was really destroying.
I want to listen to Do you have like clips of it?
I
I think they're called songs, Arnie.
Yes. That. What he said.
Yeah, they were songs actually.
I want to listen to this.
I think the Bandcamp site is still on. So if you type in Bandcamp and Power Yogas, you are good to go.
Hell yes.
I'm gonna have to check this out. Like I know you said that you guys aren't together anymore, so there's nothing to promote here, really. I think,
Yeah.
but at the same
Yeah,
time,
I think we didn't really split, but
okay. Well, then
we just didn't go for some shows, and we didn't rehearse, and yeah,
You're on hiatus.
oh,
it just died. I think 2014 or 15 or something like that.
Okay.
I think some people still think we might be there, but we aren't.
hey, so we're nearing the end of the year now. We're recording this in November. This is, I think, one of the last episodes of our 1998 series that we're recording.
Yep.
What games so far this year, Benja, have you really enjoyed?
There are a bunch. I really enjoyed Etherborn. I don't know if you heard of it.
I have not heard of it.
It's a puzzle game, but in 3D, and it's really weird. I can't even explain, so not in English, I guess.
And so, did you say it was called Netherborn or
No, it's
or like
Etherborn with
Etherborn?
Yeah, it's Etherborn.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Why did I say Etherborn? I don't know.
No, I just wanted to be clear. There was nothing wrong with how you said it. No, that's very interesting. Like the past couple of years, the only puzzle game I've played is Tetris, which I never thought would happen. But last year it was Tetris Effect. This year I've been playing Tetris 99.
Yeah, it's kind of a mix. It's kind of a mix of platforming
Oh, this
and
looks
puzzle
beautiful.
games. So
Oh, that kind of puzzle game. Okay.
yeah, there are different figures like MC Escher did.
Oh, interesting. And anything else?
Yeah, there's something else, but I wanted to say
Sure.
it was the only game I throw out a 10 out of 10. So
Oh, wow.
yeah, it really got me.
Right on.
And then there's another game. I guess it was Knights and Bikes.
Oh, a Double Fine. Yeah, I've wanted to try that one. Tell me about it.
Yeah, it's more like a little adventure, so top down or isometric style, and you play two kids with a bike on an I think it's in Wales, an island in Wales.
Yeah.
And it's all about imagination, and you try to get to hide adventures, and
This looks adorable.
Nice. It looks really cool, I gotta say.
I didn't expect that, because it's kind of a Zelda style game, but more focused on the adventure part.
Yeah. It reminds me a little bit of a game called Grim Fandango.
Oh Lord. Segue. You're on one right now. You just transitioned so smoothly.
I don't know.
Well, it's made by the same developer. It focuses on the adventure elements.
Well, actually, Paul, Grim Fandango was made by LucasArts.
Oh, Jesus
not
Christ.
Double Fine Production.
Yeah.
Stop it. Stop it. You know nobody's saying that, right? Double Fine was built from the ashes of LucasArts. Yeah. But in any case,
from the great mind of Tim Schafer.
Yeah. Oh my God. I have all day for Tim Schafer, honestly. But yeah, everybody, that's one of the two games we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about Grim Fandango and Starcraft, and those games will be fighting to the death for our love and admiration. So we do have to select a winner of those two, just to give everyone a heads up on how we go about selecting the winner. If you've listened to one of these episodes before, you'll know what we're going to talk about. We have 5 criteria. The first one is critical reception, which is basically how did each of these games review when they were released, or even after the fact, and what do the sales numbers look like? Whether the game is genre defining, so how does this game stack up to other games of its genre? Did the game influence its genre? The next thing we look at is personal attachment. So for us 3, how do we feel about these games personally? The next thing we look at is legacy. So has this game left any mark on the video game world? Is anything from this game seen in other games? And finally, we put the games head to head. How do these games compare against each other? Which game would we rather play, and which do we think is the more important game? So that's pretty much how we're going to talk about these two games. And we might as well, do we just kind of dive into it, Arnie, or do we give a little bit of a background? I think we'll just give a little bit of background info here, yeah?
Yeah, just a little bit of info for people who may not be familiar with them.
Yeah. So both these games released, obviously, in 1998. Grim Fandango released October 28th of 1998, developed by LucasArts, specifically Tim Schafer, the director and writer. He also did games like Full Throttle, and I'm blanking, Arnie. What else did he do?
He did Broken Age in 2014.
That's right. Yeah, he made sort of a comeback in 2014 with Broken Age.
Yeah, and he's probably most well known, I guess, at this point for Psychonauts.
Yeah, I guess so. It really depends, I guess, on who you talk to and when they were, when they were gaming most, right? Because for me, when I think Tim Schafer, I think Grim Fandango, and I think and Full Throttle. What I just said, right? Those are the ones I think of, but Psychonauts came a bit later, so I can understand why you would think Psychonauts there, Arnie.
Yeah, for sure. That was, I think, the first Tim Schafer game I ever played. And it's, they recently remade it for PS4, and I think it got like a pseudo sequel. I know it got a VR game, and I think it got some sort of sequel very, very recently. But that game was so good. And you can see a lot of Grim Fandango in Psychonauts, I think, in terms of like Tim Schafer's sort of style of like how he writes characters, scenarios, like his sort of humor, things like that.
Yeah. So Grim Fandango, no sequels. I think it's Is it the only game out of the 16 that we're talking about that has no sequels?
It is the only one that either doesn't have a sequel or is not a sequel itself, because some of the games that we have on here are sequels. Yes, Grim Fandango, of all the ones we have here, is the only standalone game.
That's crazy.
Yes.
But I guess success begets success, right? Like, that's just kind of how it is. And it's the only point-and-click adventure game we have in the bracket as well. And if we were doing a 1999 or a 2000 or a 2001 and so on and so forth, it would still be the only, like, there just wouldn't be any more point and click.
There would not be any more point and clicks probably until we get to like 2016 or something.
Yeah, exactly. Like, this was, I think Grim Fandango is kind of like the apex of that past, 15 to 20 years of these kind of point
but
and
I
clicks.
think it's funny. I don't know, because I don't have perspective for it, because I don't think I didn't play Grim Fandango at the time, but it really felt like Grim Fandango was sort of the last like purely well received and well critiqued point and click, and then it sort of started going downhill for the genre from there for a while.
There was nothing around until, I guess, 2010 maybe.
Yeah,
that kind of a comeback.
Yeah. It pretty much jumped off a cliff, I would say, after Grim Fandango.
Sad. It was a very popular genre.
It is and it isn't, because we had well, no, in all seriousness, like, the thing about Grim Fandango, I find, is that it was kind of like the ultimate version of its genre, but that genre by then had become fairly tired, and it wouldn't actually it wouldn't come back until recently. Like, you've got the Telltale games, like The Walking Dead and Wolf Among Us and so on and so forth. But those are games that actually finally evolved the genre. Up until Grim Fandango, you had basically kind of two versions. You had the Sierra, typing text in like you did in the old days with King's Quest and Leisure Suit Larry. And then you had your basic kind of point and click where you just kind of try to solve the puzzle. And if you can't solve the puzzle, then you just click on everything on the screen until you get there. And I think for as good as Grim Fandango is, the genre didn't evolve until we finally kind of, put the brakes on, or took the gas off of the obtuse puzzles. Because, like, you just kind of hit a wall with those puzzles sometimes, and it's kind of brutal. I can see why the genre kind of died out.
Yeah.
Grim Fandango wasn't really a point-and-click adventure. It was just a narrative adventure, because they spare the part. No, they not spare. I'm searching for a word here. They did cut out the point-and-click part, because you had normal keyboard controlled menu, I guess.
Where you sort of move around.
Like, mainly what I'm saying, and I guess you're right. You're right, Benja. I was kind of talking about the legacy without really realizing it.
Yeah.
But it's not so much point and click in the clicking on everything on the screen, but it's more about the manipulation of objects to solve puzzles, and the puzzles might not necessarily be obvious.
Yeah, and I would say it's one of the first Telltale games, so it was really too early for a good reception, I think.
Interesting.
Yeah. I think that's fair.
Yeah, no, that's not really how I saw it. But that's a very good point, and you might be able to change my mind.
But now you got to talk to us about the other game, which I'm also very excited to talk about.
Oh my goodness, Starcraft. Starcraft released March 31st.
Fucking crap.
I know, right? March 31st of 98, and then Brood War released November 30th of 98. Like, I can't believe they released an expansion that robust, that fast. But they did. Developed by Blizzard, of course. Created by Chris Metzen and James Finney mainly. What can we say about StarCraft that kind of hasn't been said already? Like, it's
nothing.
Yeah, it's kind of okay. We're just gonna wrap this up now, right? Is what we're saying.
Yeah. Well, the thing that, again, like, StarCraft is within this bracket the RTS game. Like, it's the only one there. And RTS, I think, much like point and clicks, sort of had its big period where it was really popular and there was a ton of series that were doing extremely well. And after that sort of boom period, it sort of whittled down to like a few series that people like knew and really glommed onto.
Yes.
And then in more recent times, I feel like it's fallen sort of dormant. I think a lot of the big series that sort of crib from that are the turn-based strategy games. I think those are more, I think they're a lot easier for people to handle. Like if you're not really avidly into strategy games.
Yeah.
And I think there's also the fact that RTSs never really made that jump to console. Like whenever there's a console RTS, it just never worked as well as, mouse and keyboard style.
Yeah, it's just not possible.
Yeah, there's just too much going on. But RTSs were so big for a lot of my development and a lot of the time I was growing up. I vividly remember spending time in high school, going to the computer room after class and playing Warcraft 3 with people all the time, and I played Age of Empires at home all the time.
Yeah.
Starcraft was one that I didn't play as much, admittedly, but it really was a number one for a very long time, especially competitively.
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of it might even be the apex of the genre, honestly. I get that there are games that are technically kind of, for lack of a better word, just better than StarCraft, right? For example, the genre evolved. We've got the Total War series, which involves not just RTS parts, but, turn-based parts. Yep. And I can't recommend the Total War series enough, by the way. Yep. But StarCraft really kind of was this apex where you had these three races that eventually were perfectly balanced. The competitive scene was insane. It never really, basically what I'm saying is it never got more popular, I think, than StarCraft. I mean,
there's still a competitive scene for Brood War to this day. It's still quite popular.
Yeah, exactly. And I remember playing StarCraft, and I remember playing on BattleNet with my friends. And I remember just being looking for a game with my friends, and I'm like, man, there are a lot of Koreans playing this game.
It is their national sport, I believe, at this point.
Yeah, it is kind of it's their national esport, or at least it became their national esport. And so it's this really kind of accidental thing for Blizzard, because Blizzard certainly didn't, send this game out with the intent of it being this esport for an entire country that lasted forever, right? Mm-hmm. But they eventually did. So yeah, StarCraft, like Arnie said, RTS building on Warcraft and Warcraft 2 before it. This game was super hyped, and I was certainly happy to receive it and play it. So yeah, those are our two. So what do you say we take a little break and then we come back and we go over our 5 criteria?
Sounds good.
All right, we'll be back in a moment. All right, everyone, and we're back. So, right before we get into the Grim Fandango and StarCraft and our 5 criteria, I just got to say, during the break, Arnaldo and I looked up videos for Etherborn, the game Benja was talking about. That game looks really good. I'm going to probably play it today.
It looks really dope.
Yeah. So I'm not surprised that it's one of your favorite games this year. I saw it. I saw the videos and I'm like, oh man. Yeah. Platforming on an MC Escher kind of game plane.
Yeah, I really hung up a picture of it after I played it. So
nice.
Yeah.
Cool.
I do that always. When I like a game, I just hang up a picture.
Oh, that's cool.
Quick question then. Do you buy a print from the developer, or do you take a screenshot high res and print it out?
No, I get the press kit all the time, so there are high-res
cool.
pictures.
Nice.
So I can go to a shop and
and just get it
let
framed
them do
or
the good work.
Yeah, great. Well, that's a good idea. I should do that for my game room. But
Got like
Anyway.
a wall of fame.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. It'll just be a wall full of like Phantasy Star and Ninja Gaiden, and that'll be that. All right, so Grim Fandango and Starcraft. So the first thing we're going to look at for these two games that hate each other desperately and want to move on our show, the first thing is critical reception. So how did each of these games review, and what do the sales numbers look like?
Yeah.
So kind of an interesting story here. Grim Fandango, definitely a critical darling. We're talking about 9s or higher just across the board, for pretty much everything we saw.
A 94 at Metacritic by now.
94 on Metacritic.
Yeah.
I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised. It really is a special game, and I'm not surprised that it, reviewed that well. The sales numbers are interesting as well, because the game did well, right? Like, I think there's this commonly held belief that the game was a commercial failure. It wasn't a commercial failure. I just don't think it made back its development budget. So it sold 500,000 units by 2012. And I wouldn't be surprised that, after the re-release, it made a whole bunch of money as well. Because there was a re-release done. Was it 2017?
Something like that. It was fairly recent.
2015, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, fairly recently, within the past 5 years anyway. Now, the funny thing, of course, is that any sales from Grim Fandango no longer went to LucasArts, because LucasArts dissolved in, I think it was 2013 they dissolved, or somewhere between 2013 and 2015. So, too bad. That's a whole other story, the LucasArts story. It's very sad. Now, StarCraft, on the other hand. So StarCraft as well, reviewed very well, 8s and 9s, very well received, and it should be. I don't think anyone kind of realized when they first reviewed StarCraft what its major strength was going to be. Because when you play a game like StarCraft in 1998, you're not really thinking multiplayer, whereas today you play an RTS and multiplayer's arguably the most important part of it.
Oh, yeah.
So
I think in games in general, there's a big or at least there was. I think it's shifting now, but there was a huge focus on multiplayer for the longest time.
Yeah, exactly. So when you're talking about reviewing StarCraft, you're talking about reviewing it at a time where the single player was probably the more important part. I don't think anybody realized just how much the game would explode for its multiplayer, gameplay. So 8s and 9s across the board nonetheless, because even as a single-player game, this game is awesome. I played a lot of multiplayer, but I did play through the single-player campaign, both in the original and Brood War, and I really enjoyed it. Now, sales numbers, 11 million units.
Oh, yeah.
By
StarCraft was printing money.
Yeah, it just unbelievable.
Which is super interesting.
Grim Fandango.
Well, here's the thing is, it's really interesting because I sometimes wonder what would have happened, like what kind of company Blizzard would be if not for the fact that they replaced one money printer with another giant money printer in World of Warcraft. Like World of Warcraft, I feel like kind of changed the game for Blizzard in that they now had this thing that even when they were developing other stuff, like was always present, and they always had to put man hours and money into it to keep it, sort of going, and always developing expansions for it and such. So I wonder, like, if World of Warcraft never existed, like, what would we be at StarCraft 3, StarCraft 4?
Yeah,
like,
almost certainly.
What would Blizzard look like now?
So.
Yeah, no, they would probably look similar to what they're looking like. World of Warcraft, like they could just kind of relax and put their feet up on their gaming ottoman and take their time developing new games. Whereas if they were still releasing these kind of Diablo, StarCraft, that cycle, Arnie, we would. I'm almost certain that we would be on StarCraft 3 by now, for sure. But I mean, StarCraft as well. Like, I don't know how much or if Blizzard made any money from the fact that it became Korea's national esport. I don't think Blizzard would have made a heck of a lot off of that, because StarCraft's not a game with microtransactions. It's just a game that's made and they release patches for it, and that's it.
I mean, I think it's possible that maybe they made some money off of like hosting some of these tournaments and doing, some of that sort of work, like external work with it.
And use of
but
the
if
IP.
anything, I think
some kind of license too.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Like licensing the characters and stuff like that. But I think if anything, it was just great PR overall. Like
that's the thing,
just
right?
Being able to put your game front and center in front of so many eyeballs all the time.
Yeah, it's not that steady revenue stream like World of Warcraft, where you have X amount of subscribers and they're paying X amount of dollars to, it's cheap heroin, right? Like they've got that.
Yeah.
So, but at the same time, like it has lasted as long, or I guess longer than World of Warcraft. But anyway, they're very different, and that is a very interesting question, Arnie. I wonder what Blizzard would look like if not for World of Warcraft. But in any case, for our purposes for this show, I mean we have to give it to Starcraft, right? Like the
on the face of it, yes, it's definitely Starcraft in terms of the
no
critical reception.
If nothing else, the amount of people playing it is just staggering.
Yes.
So the next thing we're going to look at is, how does this game stack up to other games of its genre? How is it genre defining? This, I think, is a very interesting question, and I think we'll see some different answers here. So, Benja, like, how do you think this game stacks up? Like, how do you think Grim Fandango compares? How do you think Starcraft compares?
I don't really play that much RTS, and I loved Command and Conquer, so.
So Starcraft is not your bag.
I didn't like the box art, and I just played the demo of Starcraft, and it just wasn't for me. And I always stick to Command and Conquer and everything that series put out. And
okay,
I played nothing else in that genre.
That's awesome.
What about Grim Fandango on the other side of it?
I guess we're talking about genre defining, right? So as that was the first 3D adventure, I guess. It really had a big influence on others, but a really late one. So
Isn't that just the way, though? Like those games that end up coming out like towards the end of a certain time period or a certain console's life cycle, people look back on a lot of the times and are like, "Holy crap! Like this was really good. Like if it had just been maybe a couple years later or something, this would have been it."
Yeah, there are quite a few.
You have to talk about the narrative too. So it was, I think, one of the first that talked about death. So it's it's really big to just make up a whole game about death, and hope that people like it.
Yeah, well, I mean, 98, right? So people are still in this sort of video games are sort of a kid's thing, and having a game, like you said, it's funny, but it's like underneath that, the story is really heavy.
It's got that like film noir / art deco / kind of like, Mexican Day of the Dead. It's like this mashup. And of course, when we say these things out loud, they don't sound terribly appealing in and of themselves, but because Tim Schafer touches them and combines them all, then it turns into this really cool experience that is actually cohesive and not disjointed. So, Arnie, what do you think about how Grim Fandango defines its genre?
I think, both of the games, I think Grim Fandango and StarCraft are sort of standard bearers for their respective genres in very different ways. I think that Grim Fandango, like what Benja was saying, I really agree with, in that I think the pivotal part of Grim Fandango is that story, that narrative, like the narrative aspect of it is incredibly strong. And I think that you see, if nothing else, Grim Fandango sort of showed that you can have these more adult themes, you can have this very witty humor, you can have very well-developed characters in your game, and you can sort of lean on that in even a puzzle game, which puzzle games, I think people normally try to focus on the mechanics of it, like making really good puzzles, making fun puzzles. In the case of a lot of point and clicks, making like irritatingly difficult to figure out and obtuse puzzles.
Yeah.
But Grim Fandango does a really good job of making like a compelling story with really relatable characters that you really like. And I'm not saying that point and clicks didn't do that before, but I think in Grim Fandango it stands out a lot more. Like I remember a lot of those characters very fondly.
Yeah.
Unlike some of the, other point and clicks that I've played where I'd forget about literally every side character immediately.
Yeah.
With StarCraft, I think it's the opposite. Whereas I don't think I'd remember StarCraft's story very much, but mechanically, it was such a good game. It was a game that you could, it's one of those like, it's really cliche, but it's one of those easy to learn, difficult to master type of things, which I think a lot of RTSs are. But with StarCraft, it's so, you could sit down today and play Brood War, and I think you'd have a really good time. Like if you excuse the dated graphics, I think it's still incredibly enjoyable, and people still play it today competitively. And I think that speaks to the legacy of those mechanics and how I think Blizzard sort of captured a little lightning in a bottle, and they've sort of kept building upon that for, StarCraft 2 and all of its expansions.
Yeah. I think it helps that it was released at a time where 3D was still kind of in its infancy. So between StarCraft and StarCraft 2, they kind of skipped over the ugly 3D era of video games. And so you have StarCraft, which was still sprite-based and looked really good. The sprites are well detailed. You could play it today. It doesn't look ugly. I agree with you, Arnie. You could play it today and it would still be a lot of fun and it wouldn't make your eyes bleed. Yeah. And then they go to StarCraft 2, which I think was, 2000? I don't even remember anymore, man. Like, I think they started development on it in 2007.
Yeah, I think it came out maybe 2009.
Man,
2009, 2010-ish, I think, is when it came out.
Yeah, and so by then, 3D games look good. And, so they can take advantage of that. So they really kind of had great timing with StarCraft and the sequel. So, yeah, man, no, I agree with you. And with that said, Grim Fandango 3D, but one of the few 3D games I think of that era that really knew how to take the blocky presentation and make it work. Yeah. I think that's another great thing about it that is kind of undervalued. It doesn't try to make characters' heads round with polygonal textures. It just, what it did was it made the characters' heads giant squares. It made their bodies squares, basically.
Really edgy.
Yeah, and it made their expressions huge and very expressive. And it really it took something that should have hamstrung it and actually made it a strength.
Yeah. I think overall, and this is just my opinion, I think I'd have to give it to StarCraft. Because while I love Grim Fandango's narrative, and I think it's, design-wise, character-wise, narrative-wise, such a good game, the puzzles at times are hair-pullingly frustrating. Yeah. Like when I was playing it, I looked up solutions to puzzles several times. And it was, I think of it both as a strength and a failure. The strength was that the story was so good that I didn't get turned off by not being able to understand these puzzles a lot of the time. And I was so desperate to keep it moving because I wanted to see what would happen next that I had to look up the answers. But some of these puzzles, even when I saw the solution, I was like, I would have never figured that out in a million years.
No doubt about it. And the other thing with genre defining as well is StarCraft, and I've touched on this earlier, gave birth to BattleNet and, this kind of like online multiplayer competitive scene for RTSs that just didn't exist. And not only for RTSs, don't get me wrong. I played FPS games back then, but it was much different. You had to, people, just regular people like you and me, with, a T1 connection at their university or a T1 connection at their game store, they would host public servers for these FPS games. And you pick a server that was close to you and you join up to it, but maybe it's down or, maybe it's full and you have to go look for another server. Not the best way of going about it. BattleNet killed all of that. Battle.net is Blizzard. It's central. You log on, you get matched up, and you play. Period.
Yeah.
And it was an entirely different way of going about this online multiplayer problem. It was an entirely different way of solving that problem. And at the time, I thought it was awesome because I didn't have to think about anything. I could just create a game. Man, my friends and I, we used to create games where, the game room would be something like, come play us Korea, or, like anything, Koreans welcome, whatever. We just always wanted to play against Koreans because they were so freaking good at it.
Because they were the best.
Yeah, we figured it out fairly quickly. Like, my God, Korea. I know I've mentioned that already, but it's worth mentioning again. Holy crap. At the time, we kind of noticed it, and it wasn't until later that I started seeing like, holy crap, like they are really into this.
Yeah.
So,
and I mean, like you said, Battle.net gave you that ability to sort of link up with anybody.
Yeah. Linking up with my friends was seamless. It was super easy. That was, I think, definitely an innovation, and I think its effects are still felt today. So I agree with you, Arnie. I think we have to give this one we have to give this category to StarCraft.
I have to disagree, but
fair.
I think what Grim Fandango did for other games is by far more important than the esport. Yeah,
by far.
Benja does not care about your multiplayer games against Koreans.
All right. Well, while I appreciate your strong opinion there, Benja, I think we're still 2-1 on this one. So number 3, personal attachments. So how do we feel about these games personally? I think I know what direction we're going here. Benja, you've made it fairly clear that StarCraft not your favorite. Am I correct on this?
Yeah, it's not one of my favorites, but
when did you first play Grim Fandango, Benja? Did you play it?
I played the demo. Yeah, I played the demo in '98.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So
you played it you were the OG, like you played it when it came out.
Yeah, not really. I played the demo for 2 years, I think, because I didn't have the money to buy the whole game.
Gotcha.
And I got my PC in '98 too, so all the money went into the PC. And
of course.
Yeah.
Then I didn't know how to handle it, so I played the Grim Fandango demo in 256 color setting, I think.
That's amazing.
Yeah. It took a while until I found out that I could change that and make Grim Fandango look even better.
What a world where you could play.
Yeah.
I can't imagine doing that now, like having a demo that I just played over and over again. But I know as a kid, I did that with multiple games.
Absolutely.
That I couldn't go out and buy.
Yeah, and I share Benja's frustration. I think there was an era. I don't know what it's like now. I can't even wrap my head around what it's like to just kind of buy a computer now, because everything is so computerized. Like our phones, everything is so intuitive.
Yeah.
But back then, that 256 color problem, trust me, Benja, you weren't the only one. I remember
it was really difficult to figure out.
It was 100% difficult to figure out. Like I remember when I first got my computer and it was MS-DOS and Windows 3.1. Like I was almost in tears because I just could not figure out what to do with this stupid machine. Like you're so happy to get a computer.
I don't know how that works.
Yeah.
Buying a PC back then was kind of like owning a car, where like you could buy it, but if you wanted to make it your own, you sort of had to put the money and the effort into like building it up.
Yeah, 100%, especially the effort.
It took a while until I played the whole game. I think it was 2002 or 3.
Okay,
and I had a 3D early graphics card and everything was set up nicely. So it worked really good. Yeah.
I remember nothing made you feel more badass than like booting up any PC game and like going to the graphics and like putting it on the highest setting and it not chugging like it was dying.
Yeah, and I've done it by myself, so it was really great, a great feeling.
Nice.
Yeah, for sure.
by now I think I played it 5 or 6 times, I think.
Wow.
Oh Lord.
Yeah. So
do you know all the puzzles? Like, do you remember them?
Yeah, I did played it for 2 years or 3 years, I think now. So I think I forgot a lot. But yeah, I'm really good at playing it.
Yeah.
So
Grim Fandango all the way.
Cool. Arnie.
Yeah.
Personal attachment.
Very difficult. Grim Fandango, I play the remake this year? This year. Yes. Early this year. I finally played it. I loved every second of it. It was one of those where like people have hyped it up forever, but it delivered. The gameplay, like I said, a little up and down, but that story, that narrative, still good, still worth playing. If you haven't played it, go play it. My journey with Starcraft, very weird. I didn't play Starcraft when it came out because I was too busy playing Age of Empires and, all those other games.
Interesting.
Pokemon?
Yes, definitely Pokemon. And then eventually, when StarCraft 2 came out, a friend of mine got really into the scene. Like, he got really into watching tournaments, watching pros play, and he got me into it. I tried to play StarCraft 2, but I sucked at it. It was very bad. I was Terran, so I thought I was going to be tearing it up, but no.
Oh, nice. Nice. Golf clap for that one.
Thank you. I worked on it. I wrote it. And then but I still kept watching like tournaments, and I would wake up at like 5 a.m. to watch like the English stream of the Korean tournaments and stuff like that.
Cool.
And then eventually that's how I got introduced to Brood War, was through watching some of the old pros that were jumping ship to StarCraft 2 playing Brood War. And when I was like, oh, that's so cool. So then I started watching Brood War competitively, and it looks so freaking cool. I've played like here and there. I've never played the campaign, so I can't speak to that. But StarCraft, when I think of StarCraft, I think like of a very specific time in my life when I was in college and just like staying up late to watch like these, these like Final Four of like the Rotterdam Invitational tournament or something, like some crazy stuff. And then when I think of Grim Fandango, I think of, this like very recent memory of playing through a game like this and just being reminded of how much I really, really loved point and clicks, that sort of game style back in the day. So if I had to pick one, I'd definitely go with Grim Fandango because I think I have more nostalgic feelings attached to those types of games. And I think I enjoyed my time with it more than I did with StarCraft.
Fair enough. I think for me, it's clearly StarCraft. I didn't play Grim Fandango back in the day. Unfortunately, I was kind of burned out on the... I know it's not a point and click, Benja. Please don't get angry with me, but I'm gonna call it a point and click.
Yeah, I'm good.
But I was kind of burned out on that genre. I'd been playing it since I was a kid, and it just didn't do it for me anymore. Whereas StarCraft was not necessarily new because I'd been playing RTS for a long time, but StarCraft delivered a level of polish and multiplayer accessibility. Like, I played Warcraft 2 online with my friends, and it was a giant pain in the ass because you'd have to connect via modem, and you'd play. It was just a shit show. And StarCraft, seamless, and the balance level between the races. I'd never seen anything like it. Like, it was so well balanced for these completely different play styles. It was really cool, and I enjoyed it for years. So,
yes.
For me, clearly StarCraft, and we can definitely move on now. Personal attachment.
Played Protoss, which I still haven't forgiven you for.
Look, man, the Terrans are just like, they're just these squishy. I'm a Terran, dude. Like, I've seen Terrans. They're everywhere. I work with them. I see them at the grocery store. I'm done. Right.
At least you didn't play Zerg. That would have been truly problematic.
The Zerg really scared me. I just couldn't. I just couldn't do it.
Bug creatures.
Yeah. So personal attachment goes to Grim Fandango. Then between the three of us, I can see the love here for Grim Fandango over StarCraft. So the next one is Legacy. What kind of mark have these games left on the video game world? Is anything from these games seen in other games, and how is it remembered? So Arnie, why don't you start us off here? What do you think here of the legacy of these two games?
I think with Grim Fandango, it's obvious that there is, like, especially I'm seeing it more in the newer, like, indie developed point and clicks and adventure games that are showing up now. And I think it's a lot of it is just that, you know, that writing, that humor, that character development, that you're starting to see a lot more of. I think a lot of developers now that are making these kinds of games are realizing that you can make a fun, interactive, challenging puzzle without using moon logic that makes literally no sense and having people click on every single inch of the screen to try to find that one hidden item that's going to solve the puzzle that they've been stuck on for 36 years. And I think a lot of that has to do with the internet now. Like, people know you can just go on the internet and solve the puzzle, so there's no point in making it, like, obtusely difficult. But to the contrast of that, like, what Grim Fandango has given is that now people know, like, let's set our game, let's not focus as much on the mechanics of it. Let's set it in an interesting world with interesting characters that people are going to want to get to know and are going to want to explore to learn more about the story that we're trying to tell. Like, let's tell a story and let's have the puzzles be secondary to that. And I think that's what Grim Fandango's big legacy is. That it sort of, if not started that move towards that direction, definitely took it to the next level and made it very clear that that's what it needed to be and made a really good product out of that. With Starcraft, I think it's, you know, similar but different in that Starcraft definitely does have a legacy. It has a legacy just as Starcraft, as a series that's still ongoing, that people still play all around the world and really enjoy. I remember when StarCraft 2 came out, like, that was an event.
Oh my God.
People were losing their minds that Blizzard was finally making a sequel to the original StarCraft. That love had, like, just been crystallized for a decade. And when Blizzard finally announced it, people were going nuts, you know, and it still feels that way every time they announce a new expansion. I mean, now that they've done Legacy of the Void, I think was the last expansion, I think people are just going to start that cycle all over again, waiting for StarCraft 3. So, you know, in that sense, I think StarCraft has a very tangible legacy, a very real legacy that you can just see with your eyes. But in a more abstract sense, like we talked about before, I think StarCraft was just that good, like that good of an RTS that people want that sort of experience again. Like, the way they set up everything, the way they balanced everything was just really well done. And then obviously BattleNet, like, it's not directly related to StarCraft, but I think StarCraft was the game that it sort of launched with. And I know you've sort of talked it to death, Paul, but it is that big of a deal. Like,
it
that
really
ability
is.
to do multiplayer, especially in RTS games, is huge. And I think that's another thing that you can point to and be like, StarCraft sort of did it, or at least did it first. I'm sure Blizzard, if they had never made StarCraft, I'm sure they would have eventually come out with BattleNet. Yeah, but the two are sort of tied because of the way it happened. But I think overall, if I'm really thinking about it and I'm being honest with myself, I'd probably have to give legacy to StarCraft, just because of where the genres are. I think that if we do this again in a few years, then Grim Fandango might be my pick, because I think we're seeing more and more of the type of genre of game that Grim Fandango is, and I think that genre is going to keep growing. Whereas RTSs outside of like StarCraft and a few other, you know, series that are still doing that, I don't think it's going to ever get back to where it was.
Right. Good points. Yeah, I like this. What about you, Benja?
Yeah, I think I have nothing to add to StarCraft. I can see that it got a big influence on esports, and by now there are watching millions of people some matches in World Cups and kind of stuff like that.
That's
so,
right.
Yeah, and you can see the mechanics in a whole lot of RTSs. So I guess it got its legacy, and I can see that and appreciate it.
I guess.
Yes.
So I can move on to Grim Fandango now.
Yes, you can.
So Grim Fandango has a big influence on I said Telltale before. I would go as far as to say Telltale wouldn't be possible without Grim Fandango.
That is
and
fair.
Neither would Double Fine or Night School Studio.
Mm.
So they were all involved in LucasArts and made Oxenfree and Broken Age by Tim Schafer and all those Telltale games. And
Yeah.
you can see some of the mechanics too. So the protagonist of Grim Fandango, Manny, got a pretty unique mechanic that he could move his head apart from his body. So it was the first game he really pointed with his eyes or his head at the things you have to choose and to interact with. And
I never even thought about that, but you're right. Like now that I'm thinking back on it, he would like look wherever you like moved your cursor to, he would follow you.
Yeah, right. And when you go to a door, he looks at the doorknob, and it's really nice. And you can see that in a lot of games now. It wasn't integrated before.
Yeah.
The noir style is also a big influence. You can see it in LA Noir and in some other games that I can't name now.
But no, I agree with you. Like that was, I don't think before Grim Fandango I had seen a game that sort of leaned on that like style before. It was very strange, but it was cool.
Yeah, very unique.
And then the writing is it's seen in every game now. So Sam and Max, Back to the Future, and all narrative adventures or story-driven games, they all rely on Grim Fandango. And
she's kind of changing my mind about this, Paul.
Don't worry, I'll change it back.
I would say they wouldn't be possible without Grim Fandango.
So I see it a little bit differently. I see Starcraft. We've talked about the legacy. I don't think there's anything to add there. You know, the whole esports aspect. I literally just said there's nothing to add there, and I started talking about it. But I think we're done with that. But the legacy of Grim Fandango, I think, is a little bit sadder, maybe, because like the way I see it is, I see the Telltale games and I see like Firewatch and those kind of games. I see them being very different from Grim Fandango. I see Grim Fandango as being kind of the logical endpoint of an era and a style, and then that style kind of died with it. And I'm saying died, that's very strong, right? Because we still had The Longest Journey that came afterwards. We still had Siberia. There were still games like that. But Grim Fandango, I think, was kind of the apex for that style, and it never got better. Until fairly recently, where they kind of evolved it and made it more about the narrative and less about the puzzles. Because we can talk about Grim Fandango and the narrative, and it's superlative, it's fantastic. But we also can't ignore the fact that there are some puzzles in there that are brutal. And especially in 98, if you don't have, I would say most people even had internet access by then with 56K modems and so on. But like, if you're not someone who wants to look up an FAQ for this game, you will hit a wall. You are playing a game that you will hit a point and you will become frustrated, and you will not be able to progress with the superlative narrative. And they had to, I think nowadays, they kind of had to get by that. The puzzles nowadays in these games are not that hard. They're more focused on the narrative and enjoying that with some light puzzle, character movement, and so on and so forth. So, I don't see Grim Fandango the same way that you guys do. I see it as kind of like the apex, the endpoint for a certain style. And then it took a long time afterwards for that style to finally evolve to a point where it started picking up steam and becoming more popular again. Anyhow,
Yeah.
that's just how
but
I look at it.
it's also an influence to make it better. So I don't see it. It's troubling my other
Grim
points.
Fandango has its DNA in a lot of different places, and StarCraft maybe not so much. Again, because RTS genre is so much more compressed.
Yeah, and RTS is definitely a more it's definitely a more pigeonholed, I guess, experience. I can't think of a better word, but like there's only so much you can do with an RTS, right? With an adventure game, you have a little bit more freedom. You can make a Knights and Bikes, you can make a Broken Age, you can make a Firewatch. These are all very differently playing games that people still kind of consider the same genre. Whereas with RTS, you're pretty much stuck clicking, dragging, selecting a bunch of units and throwing them at other units while developing
Unless
your
you're Tim
resources.
Schafer, and then you make Brutal Legend, which is
Yes.
super insane.
Oh my god, Brutal Legend, that's another one I have all day for, honestly. The presentation in that game is just unreal.
Is so
like
good.
It might be the most visually presented game I've seen until perhaps Persona 5. But anyway, we're not talking about Brutal Legend. So yeah, in that way, I do think, and the other thing too is Grim Fandango wasn't commercially available for a really long time. So you had these people who played it, newer versions of Windows, OpenGL cards, and Grim Fandango was no longer compatible, perhaps. And so you had like a really long stretch where Grim Fandango was very difficult to play. Not in that it's a difficult game to play, but it's difficult to find the hardware to run it. And
that they made it available I think in 2008, so it runs on newer versions with Windows. So.
But I mean, it wasn't released on Steam and other platforms until like 2015, 2016, right? So yeah, I think it's kind of inflated because it's one of these games where, because it's very difficult to play, you kind of have that hipster effect where people are like, man, Grim Fandango was the best. Too bad you can't play it.
I definitely felt 30% cooler after I played it. In all fairness.
Yeah, it's like the floor map.
Exactly. Definitely makes me feel better about myself as a person.
Anyhow, that said, it makes it sound like I'm pooping on Grim Fandango. I'm not, right? Just, this is just how I see how its legacy was, which was one where, this is what we're capable now of with games and narrative, but at the same time, these puzzles are kind of killing our genre and we need to move on. And then eventually they did. Yeah. So anyhow, I mean, I think we're giving legacy to StarCraft. Sorry, Benja. Benja's just like, standing for real here for Grim Fandango. I love it. Head-to-head's the last one. How do these games compare against each other? Which game would you rather play? So, in an effort to keep the runtime of this episode to a reasonable level, Benja, I'm going to take a wild guess here, and I'm going to say you would prefer to play Grim Fandango. Am I right?
No, I would prefer to play StarCraft.
Stop it.
No.
Bringing lies to our podcast. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
We're going to have to censor everything you just said.
No, of course. I would love to play Grim Fandango another time. Maybe for a 7th or 8th time. I really love it. It's, I think, one of my top 10 games ever.
Awesome. And for me, while StarCraft is not one of my top 10 games ever, I would still much rather play StarCraft. So, Arnie, to decide head-to-head, what game would you rather play today?
I'm going to say Grim Fandango. I think because StarCraft, to me, StarCraft is also heavily dependent, especially now, I think, on that multiplayer aspect. Like, when I think of wanting to play StarCraft, I don't think I'd want to play the campaign outside of never having played it before. But when I think of, like, which one of these would I probably want to play through multiple times, it would definitely be Grim Fandango.
Interesting. That's a fair point. It's very difficult to separate StarCraft from the multiplayer. And admittedly,
and I suck at the multiplayer, so I get my ass kicked.
That's the thing. So do I. Don't get me wrong. Like, just because I played it a lot, it only makes it more sad how terrible I was at it. You know, it wasn't Street Fighter where I was at least reasonable. You know.
Yeah, you didn't have your macros up. You didn't have your clicks per minute up.
Oh, dude, my micro was failing. It just wasn't. It was not up there. No. So, while I highly encourage people to play Grim Fandango, I do think, based on our structure, we're giving this to Starcraft.
No, I gave it to Grim Fandango.
Well, not head-to-head. Sorry. Head-to-head, we're giving to Grim Fandango, but overall, who's moving on?
Overall? Well, I know Benja's going Grim Fandango, and you're going Starcraft. So, as always, with all of these episodes, that leaves me. Somehow, this is like built into the structure.
Well, remember, Arnie, mathematically, 3 of the 5 categories were given to Starcraft. I'm just saying.
I know, but we've established that means nothing. So now I do have to think in terms of who's moving on, because I think as it relates to me, like if I had to pick one of these games that I was like, one of these has to exist and the other doesn't. Don't make Korea hate you, Arnie. I think it is Grim Fandango. I don't think we'll ever be popular in Korea. I think Grim Fandango is my vote. All right then. I wholeheartedly disagree. I can't wait. I know you voted with your heart this time with Banjo-Kazooie and Metal Gear. You did not vote with your heart, and you cried about it later. Now you are voting with your heart, and I can't wait to hear what Ozzy has to say to you. This is gonna be great. I'm actually, just for that reason, I'm glad that you voted for Grim Fandango. I will say, I did host an Instagram vote on this a while ago. Yeah. When we were initially supposed to record for this. And I believe Grim Fandango did win, but it was extremely close. It was much closer than I had initially anticipated. Wow. There's a lot of StarCraft love out there. Well, I mean, 11 million in sales can't be wrong. Except for this episode where it totally can. But again, I was a Warcraft boy. I was not a StarCraft boy. Fair enough. So that's great. So Grim Fandango is moving on. It's more interesting. I think it was, to me, it was obvious that StarCraft should move on, but I'm actually happy that Grim Fandango has. Frankly, as long as Pokemon eventually doesn't win, I'm very happy with this whole project. So, and then when Pokemon does win, you're just going to burn everything to the ground. Well, I mean, I'm going to retire. Like, obviously, I'm going to move out into the wilderness, and I'll probably see, Snorlax somewhere, or what was that other stupid one? Butterfree? Yeah. I'll probably see Butterfree out of the corner of my eye and be like, oh my God, Pokemon, I can't escape. Anyhow. All right. So Grim Fandango's our winner. This was a lot of fun. Thank you again, Benja, for joining us. Yeah, thanks for having me on the show. Awesome. And again, if you enjoy the podcast, please rate and review and talk to us. You can talk to us on Instagram. We are at Region Free Gamers Podcast. You can also find us on our website, regionfreegamers.com, where we write companion pieces to our podcasts. You can find Benja on Instagram as well. She's at Frau_Lametta. Yeah, that's right. Okay, perfect. I forgot. I have Instagram open right here. I could have just looked. I don't know why I'm trying to. How dare you have something else open instead of when you're supposed to be recording this podcast? I'm not that active right now, but I will be. Very good. And you can also find her on her indie gaming zine, Welcome to Last Week. I believe that's in German, but you can always Google Translate if you're interested in hearing what she has to say. Yeah, Arnie, am I forgetting anything? I think we're good here. Yeah. Yep. Instagram, Region Free Gamers Podcast. Twitter at Region Free Gamer. I'm sure we'll start a SoundCloud for my mixtapes, and we'll get on Pinterest or something. Sure. I can't wait to hear your mixtapes. All that sweet SEO. And regionfreegamers.com for all of our nonsense that we don't keep on here. All right. Thanks again, guys. Take care.